Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm joined by Joyce. And Joyce, we're back. Oscars Playback, season 3.
We got renewed? Was it a late pickup? Were we on the bubble? I don't know.
Who could say? We going places where most Netflix shows don't. Season 3, Joyce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A good thing we didn't end on a cliffhanger in case season 2 was the last one.
No cliffhangers here. But we're going back in time. This is a prequel season, maybe.
There's no order to our chaos.
No.
So
You're just joining us. We've already done 90s Oscars and 2000s Oscars.
and we also did the year of 1989. So this season will just be 9 years.
Now we're doing the 80s, 9 80s episodes. So every week between now and whenever, 9 weeks from now, we'll be going through the 80s Oscars. And like we were saying here before we started, Joyce, not a lot of theatrical recall for either one of us, specifically for this year, where I was 2 and you were not even born.
I was not born, no. I was not alive for half of this decade. And then like the other half is also kind of a wash because I was a
child
toddler, basically.
So not a lot of like, hey, remember when we saw American Beauty at Lincoln Square, like I had for the 90s?
No personal anecdotes. I mean, like personal anecdotes, but not like live in the moment.
No.
So
So we're gonna do the 53rd annual Oscars, the 1981 Oscars, to celebrate the movies of 1980.
And this, delayed by a day.
As we'll talk about, they took place on Tuesday, March 31st, 1981. Originally supposed to be held on Monday, March 30th, 1981. And then something happened where President Ronald Reagan, an assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan, a real thing that happened, and they only delayed the Oscars for 24 hours.
I love that you said a real thing that happened.
I just think like people nowadays, if they're younger, might be shocked.
The children.
For children might be shocked that even in modern history, there are assassination attempts on
Yeah, John Hinckley tried to assassinate Reagan to impress Jodie Foster.
Correct.
Yes.
And he's still out there. He's still
he wasn't in prison because he was found not guilty because of insanity. So he was just institutionalized for years. And has since been released and is doing music.
Yeah,
I perused his wiki page.
Yes, and I've seen like he's been trying to do mounting shows as recently as recently.
Yeah, I think he released like an EP last year. So I have not checked it out on Spotify. So I don't know.
Needless to say, if it was nowadays, I would say the Oscars would have been delayed for more than a single day. If anything like this happened now, but in 1981, they were like, fuck it, we're doing it again. Reagan said it was all right, we're doing it. That was it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it later when we talk about the show, but there was also a pre-tape message from Reagan.
Which I have transcribed.
A former actor, in case any children don't know.
Completely unsurprised that he participated in the Oscars. This was the 1981 Oscars. We'll talk about the show, but just the year and the show, just the overview. Ordinary People wins Best Picture. Robert Redford wins Best Director. I think a lot of people might remember this as, hey, Martin Scorsese probably missed a directing win here, and maybe for Best Picture too for Raging Bull. That was like, from my formative memories of this, having never seen it until literally just we did this, or is that Ordinary People should not have beat Raging Bull. And having now rewatched both recently, Joyce, because I try to do my research here, I would say I'm not as convinced about that.
No, I've never been one of those keyboard critics, who part of the group think that like Raging Bull was robbed.
Yes. So we'll get to that. Most nominations were, however, Raging Bull and The Elephant Man with 8, Coal Miner's Daughter with 7, Fame, Tess, Ordinary People all with 6, Empire Strikes Back with 4, Melvin and Howard 3, Private Benjamin 3, and a movie called The Stuntman with 3. Joyce, again, can't say I really have a lot of familiarity with The Stuntman. Sounds great though.
Well, how long is your list of our favorite films of 1980? How short? I guess I should say.
So much shorter than it had been for the 90s and 2000s. But I still would say my general overview of the whole 80s going into this season, I was like, my thoughts on the 80s for Oscars were, this is, I think, where the idea that the movies I like wouldn't win Oscars came from. Because I think in the 80s, there's like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of classic movies that never had a single chance to win an Oscar. And the movies that won Oscars, I think, that epitomize this decade are like Out of Africa, mid to
Yeah, and
lower mid.
I think that's more towards the back half of the
Yes.
decade.
Yes.
Then I don't think this year is part of it. I think this year is one of the better winners of the
So
decade.
hilariously, I agree. And also we'll do next when we do 81 movies, I was also surprised by a movie like On Golden Pond, which we'll talk about obviously a little bit
Did
here
you
and later.
cry over on Golden Pond?
I didn't cry about it, but I found it like really funny. And I guess I think you're right. Like I guess my take was like there's like a stigma that these are all mid boring Oscar movies. And Ordinary People I don't actually think is. I think it's actually quite good and like a great version of a movie that I love and that I've seen a million different times, including like American Beauty, which obviously sucks now, but like at the time was good. You know what I mean? Like and stuff like that, where it's like this movie is like the original of these other movies that I also like. So that was interesting. But again, looking at this list, I was like, oh, there's a lot of movies here that I think have some certainly staying power in the culture and are like really great, but also we're never going to get Oscars ever. So I have like a list of.
Well, there's Airplane.
So the big ones are Airplane, Empire Strikes Back, Blues Brothers, The Shining. Those are like the four I
Caddyshack.
wrote down. Caddyshack also. So
Mm-hmm.
those are like formative movies, right?
Yeah.
From a lot of
9
people.
to 5.
5 is a great one. Friday the 13th, a classic.
One, when I was like going through like the list of 1980 releases, one film I completely forgot about, but I watched religiously when I was a child was Popeye.
Same. And I actually wanted to revisit it. I didn't have a chance to, but I was like, this is a calamity, right? Like Robert Altman, just a total mess.
Yeah, but like when I was watching when I was like 4 or 5, I was like, this is the best movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Like
Even
Robin
a movie
Williams,
like
my goat. Like
yeah, and even a movie like Popeye has like legitimate like length in the culture only because like obviously there's so many directors who worship Altman. Like I was thinking of like Punch Drunk Love a lot because that is so like they use the music from Popeye in Punch Drunk Love, right? Like it's like there is like a staying power with that movie, even if it was like a notorious flop. There's actually a lot of notorious flops this year, or at least 2, because Heaven's Gate is another one.
Oh yeah, Heaven's Gate. I was just gonna say that next. But like the year in general, I think the whole vibe between just everything that was released and also just the Oscar race was like this year sucked.
It feels
And
I
I
think
know
that
you didn't read the chapter in Inside Oscar this
no,
year
I didn't.
because you don't
I don't
read.
do the reading. I let you do the reading.
Yeah, and that was like basically like most of the comments in there in the section. It
I
was
think
just
if you
like,
look
oh,
at
like this
the
is not gonna make money. We're gonna pull it, or like this film can't find a backer or a distributor. There's like a lot of stuff like that.
I think if you look at the list, I do feel like that's very apparent. And also with the Oscar nominees, it feels like there's 5 movies that got all the nominations, and that's it.
Yeah, and then also back in this time, fewer award shows, which is great.
We love that.
Yeah,
Love to
not
see
a
it.
lot of rubber stamping. I mean, there is because like like Robert De Niro winning everything basically,
Right.
but we don't have like 300 critics groups. SAG does not exist yet. PGA doesn't even exist yet. So it's basically like the big 3 critics groups: New York, LA, National Society, and then NBR, shadow group doing whatever they're doing since like the 30s. And then there's like obviously some like second tier critics groups that have been around longer, like Kansas and stuff, and Boston. Was Boston back? I don't even know if Boston existed then, but like there are some other ones, but not as many as there are now presently announcing like every day. So there wasn't like oversaturation
No.
of precursors back then.
What if gatekeeping was good? That's maybe a through line for this decade. So movies are so we mentioned Airplane. So of these comedies, which have you seen the most? Airplane, Blues Brothers, Caddyshack. I feel like those are like the 3 on this year.
Probably like Airplane and Caddyshack. I actually haven't seen Airplane in a really long time. I like maybe like since I was a child, but I watched it a lot when I was a child.
Interestingly, I would agree. I think I went through phases where I was like, when I was a younger person, the spoof nature of Airplane seemed really
Or
fun.
maybe like was it just like on TV more when we were kids?
I think it probably was, but there's so many silly sight gags. I was also a big Top Secret fan. So when I was younger, which we'll talk about later, and I felt like just as natural to do Airplane. And I love those guys. And obviously the movies that spawned out of Airplane, like Naked Gun or Hot Shots, were big when I was like in my youth. So that was great. But I would say Caddyshack I've seen probably 3,000 times, all within age 14 to age 25. Probably I saw it like 8,000 times. Haven't seen it again since. Burned in my brain. Absolutely one of the funniest movies I ever
Yeah, I
made.
haven't seen Caddyshack in a while, but
Oh my
I've
God.
seen it a lot.
Chris Nashuati wrote a great book about Caddyshack, and that one I actually read because I used to work with Chris, so I made a point to read and support a fellow colleague.
You just read books written by people you know.
If you
Like
know me, if I know somebody, if you wrote a book and I know you, there's like a 75% chance I have read it.
they give you the galleys.
Yeah.
So
But
I
I
guess
haven't read all. I have other books though from friends. I'll tell you later that I never read.
oh
I
wow.
might have said I read it, but
This
I never did.
this is offline. Scoop.
That's offline. But the Caddyshack one I did read, and it's great. And Caddyshack was just a home run. Um, yeah, and Blues Brothers, I gotta say, like, not the biggest fan of, but
Me either.
what are you gonna do? The Shining, obviously, I've seen a million times. Great movie. I think this is one of those that if it came out now, it would be well more represented at these Oscars, but obviously was not going to happen then.
Um yeah, it's definitely one of those films that have been relitigated as the years have gone by.
There's a
So
lot of them in here like that. I
yeah,
think.
a lot.
Well, Heaven's Gate was a calamity. There's a 3.5 hour director cut on Criterion now, and I think a lot of people consider this to be like an absolute classic now, even though it shut down a studio basically because it was such a money loser.
Yeah, just a lot of films that just really did not uh do that well. And then that was like the big because back like now it doesn't matter like the like or not doesn't matter, but it's like not as big of a deal, but like theatrical releases and everything and then money makers. And like the big film of the year was Empire Strikes Back,
Yes.
obviously.
Uh,
Which is
fantastic.
also another film that's been like relitigated because the reviews back then were mixed.
Yeah, now it's obviously the best
Yeah,
Star
and now
Wars
it's like the
movie.
best one that
So
ever was.
good. It's still great. I'm not too cool to say Star Wars is bad. It's still good. The top movies at the box office today were Empire Strikes Back, 9 to 5, like you mentioned, a classic. Love it. Did you ever see the Broadway show?
No, I have not.
It's a hilarious. I saw it. We saw it, and Allison Janney's in it, and they do she can't dance, and they try to like hide her dancing. It's really fun.
I'm
Stir
just like,
Crazy,
yeah, but she's also really tall.
yeah. Stir Crazy, classic, another classic comedy. I was actually thinking of this recently because I interviewed, I think, yeah, Joyce, I interviewed Jeffrey Wright last year for American Fiction. Remember American Fiction?
Oscar winner, American Fiction.
And he talked about like Stir Crazy as like an influence on uh Monk when he has to play the author. Very fun. When he plays Stagger Lee, like doing like
When he's
them,
being interviewed.
yeah, doing
Yeah.
like this kind of thing. So it's good. Airplane was the fourth highest grossing movie of the year. Anyway, any which way you can, a Clint Eastwood buddy movie. These I think have a lot of fans, but not in the culture anymore. I think there is a subset of Clint
Yeah.
fans though
Well,
who love
this
these.
is the sequel to Every Which Way But Loose. So we have
Right.
a lot of comedies here
Yeah.
at the box office, topping the
So
box office.
I guess coming out of the 70s, the late 70s, not the greatest time for America.
No.
And certainly the 80s certainly weren't either. Maybe No Time isn't great for America, but there was a sense of hope, I think, into the 80s.
Well, now we're starting, Reaganomics. He was
Yes.
just elected
Yes.
in 1980. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So regardless of the politics, I felt like there was like a sense of the country was somehow in 1980 incredibly unified, at least for in terms of putting Reagan in office because he won in such a landslide, right?
Yeah.
Over Jimmy Carter. So while that maybe has not aged well, there was a sense of that, and maybe more like you said, like a lot of lightheartedness here as we hit to the
Yeah,
into
because
the
number
new year.
6, Private Benjamin.
Private Benjamin, very fun, another great movie, classic archetype movie, right?
Yeah.
Written by Nancy Myers and Charles Shire, so we love that. Coal Miner's Daughter, music biopics, fucking undefeated for 40 years running, basically.
I think this is like one of like what you were saying before about ordinary people being like a better version of like the family dramas that, like everyone's used to. I think Coal Miner's Daughter is a better version of a musician biopic
Yes.
that we're all used to.
Smokey and the Bandit 2, Joyce.
Sure.
Bert and Sally back again.
Hmm.
The Blue Lagoon.
So I don't even know how I watched it, but somehow I think it was just like on TV or something when I was a kid. Not this movie, but the sequel, Return to the Blue Lagoon.
Okay.
And I just like watched it. And like I knew, I don't even remember it, but like I knew it was a sequel. So then I was like, oh, I need to watch the original someday. And then I don't know, like probably like years later, I watched The Blue Lagoon. I was like, this is not good.
This is another like the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet, just completely not what you want.
No,
Pretty problematic.
yeah, Brooke Shields, Christopher Atkins. Brooke was like 15.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Not great, Bob.
no,
And then The Blues Brothers was the 10th highest grossing movie of the year.
sure.
So a lot of like SNL, that's these guys like coming to ascendancy, a lot of stupid comedy like Airplane, Star Wars here. I mean, you look at this list and I'm like, it is funny. You think of the 80s or like nowadays, everything is like sequels and nonsense. But I'm like, there's a lot of here that's, if not, they're not sequels, but it does feel like a lot of broad mainstream stuff here.
Yeah, because it was still monoculture.
Yes.
You know, whatever was big, and like people went to the movies. So they went out to be entertained for a couple hours. So
other movies I wrote down, Joyce. Some of these, let me see. Cruising, William Friedkin movie with Al Pacino.
Yeah, but when he died, I was like, should I watch that again? Because like so many people were tweeting about it.
Another movie that has completely been relitigated by culture, and now I think held up as more of a, I don't know, classic is the right word, but it's definitely have more respect now and less like, fraught than it was.
Yeah, also different time back then, so the reception was different. And in the same vein, American Gigolo.
Yes, got that one down too. Mad Max.
Yeah, it was already released in Australia in 79, but we got it here in 80. So
never big into the Mad Max movies. My first one was Road Warrior, though.
I think they're fine. So I mean, we have Furiosa now.
I'm way into Furiosa and Fury Road. I can't wait for
yeah, I would say I like Fury Road the most out of all of them.
I think Fury Road, and then I would say Road Warrior, then Mad Max, then Beyond Thunderdome. That would be my top 4 into Furiosa. Friday the 13th, I mentioned. Fame, obviously classic. A lot of these with classic songs for this year, Joyce. 9 to 5 and Fame.
Yeah, and then Call Me from American Gigolo.
And on the road again, too, is that right? Or no? Let me see what else I wrote down. Urban Cowboy, that was an HBO special. John Travolta and Deborah Winger.
Yeah, Deborah Winger got some like critics citations. But no,
this is a great decade
and
for
the Globe
Deborah
nomination, but no Oscar nomination.
A great decade for Deborah Winger, and I look forward to talking all about her later this year.
Can't wait to talk. Yeah. She's had early 80s, a lot of stuff in the early 80s.
I'm not going to waste it now, but I'll just say can't wait to talk about Deborah Winger. Just very excited for the Terms of Endearment season episode. Let's see what else I wrote down. Prom Night, another horror movie. Dressed to Kill, Brian De Palma movie.
Again,
I
feel like now, or like if that movie came out now, like he would have had more traction. Like he had some critics love a little bit. But
yeah, De Palma never seemed to get the respect that he deserved, probably.
No, but like Michael Caine, Angie Dickinson, great.
I'm sure politically it's not as great, but I think it's still pretty great. A Woody Allen movie that I actually did really like at one point, Stardust Memories. Pretty good. It's actually pretty good. I haven't watched in a long time, but would say it was a strong one. Gloria is another movie that I think has aged really well and more people have found later than even.
I watched the Sharon Stone version first from like 99, and then I watched this one.
The Long Good Friday is another one that I think people nowadays would say is like really good, but maybe at the time wasn't as shined on.
Yeah. Did you are you a fan of Xanadu?
No. I remember the box in the video store, but no.
I mean, iconic.
Can't miss that. Raging Bull we talked about. We'll talk about more. Heaven's Gate, Popeye, Stir Crazy, 9 to 5. Seems Like Old Times, which I think is Chevy Chase and Goldie.
Yeah, and then Neil Simon.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
One of those Chevy Chase movies that's also like, to me, also like, we'll probably talk, I'll mention it when we do that year. A Deal of the Century is a William Friedkin movie with Sigourney Weaver and Chevy Chase and I think Gregory Hines. And it's one of those that I remember renting at the video store, getting my parents to rent and being like, this will be like a fun time at the movies with good old Chevy. And it's like not that funny. And this is another one that's like, oh, this is not like goofy Caddyshack Ty
love,
Webb.
don't you love when like when you're a kid and like you have like a favorite actor or just like, you know, you're used to seeing an actor perform in a specific style or genre, and then you're like, I will watch that person in their next movie, and you do, and it's just a completely different thing, and you're like, I don't
Moscow on the
know.
Hudson was another one with Robin Williams. Where you're like, I love Rob Williams. He's goofy. He's
But
goofy. I love
I
that
think that's
guy.
more of like not like in general just user error, because I do think we we have to like actors do get typecast because like they're given roles, and then like we see them in those roles, so it's like our fault that we like can't expand our imagination to picture them in different types of roles and films, you know.
Also, we had less awareness. Obviously, no internet, right? No,
Yes,
nothing.
yeah.
Like you're just like, oh,
You
there's a
can't
new Robin
Google,
Williams
yeah,
movie, right?
yeah.
Of course, I mean, I'm gonna assume I'm gonna like it. I like Robin
Mhm.
Williams, or I like Chevy Chase. So of course, like this seems like old times. We right up my alley. I also wrote down Altered States, which always freaked me out.
Oh yeah, yeah. Bill Hurt.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Ken Russell directed it.
Mhm.
That's all I got here. Not a long list, Joyce.
Have you seen the jazz singer with Neil Diamond?
I've never seen it. I know about it, but I've never seen it.
This is supposed to be his like star vehicle, and he was
Mhm.
also supposed to present at the Oscars,
Mhm.
but he had to drop out one day, pushed it for a day. So that was like something I loved about like the delay too. It was there's like I guess I'll read it now. Um, when they postponed the ceremony for a day. So obviously Reagan was fine. He recovered. And so in here it says, at 2 p.m. Pacific time, the Academy made it official. The show would not go on as scheduled, but would be held the following evening. Doctors reported that Reagan was out of danger and recovering by the late afternoon. So many of the celebrity watchers already in the bleachers wanted to know why the Academy was making them come back tomorrow. Quote, it isn't fair, said one spectator. He didn't die.
Amazing.
Another fan was puzzled, saying, quote, the thing I don't understand is how they can have all those stars as telephone numbers to call them up and tell them to come back later. Like, imagine if this happened now.
If this
Like the
happened now,
coordination, like there's so many people who are like on a flight like 6 a.m. the next morning to get to like wherever they need to get to the
if
next
this
day.
happened now, it would be delayed at least a week,
Yeah.
if not
They
more.
they have to like clear their schedules. So,
It would be a complete calamity if
mhm.
it happened now. Uh, it would be overthought to death. I didn't read the Inside Oscar Joyce, but I did some research. You'll be
You
surprised to
did
know.
a lot of Googling on the assassination attempt.
I did that, and I also did about the show. So I found Buzz Cohan, who was a writer on this show, and also ended up writing, I think, on the Emmys after 9/11. Just like a guy who was like a award show writer, tragedy magnet for this. And he had a thing in THR, I think, in 2016. And he said, as I recall, Reagan was shot on Monday, and the show was supposed to be that night. The question became, do we do the show or just suspend it and give everything over to the news department? I remember we were in rehearsals with host Johnny Carson at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and everyone was running around with an opinion. I'm sure there were network people running around too, trying to appear human, but really just protecting their investment. The ultimate decision was to postpone it one day, but nobody knew as we were holding these meetings whether Reagan was going to pull through. Oddly enough, it was Reagan himself who set the tone by saying to the doctors in the operating room, please tell me you're all Republican. We figured if a man who was shot can make a joke about it, he'd given us permission to do the same.
Great. Reagan, who's his writer? His not his speechwriter, but his comedy writer. Does he have like an Ava Daniels?
I don't know. Maybe. He
Mm,
might. Reagan
yeah.
was the first president to address the Oscars since 1941 and FDR. That was a pretty fraught year. Reagan just showed up to do this video presentation that they taped like 2 weeks before the show, just be like, hey, isn't it cool I'm president? That was basically it. I'm an
Yeah, because he
Academy.
had just but this was, you know,
Yes.
like 2 months since his inauguration.
Yes.
And
Yes.
again, former actor. So And then like he had some he had a funny line.
So Johnny brings so just we'll go into the show. So like we said,
Well, we should start with the carpet.
So Tuesday, March 31st, 1981. It was the show's 3 hours and 10 minutes, so 5 minutes shorter than the previous year.
But also this started at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. I'm like, fuck that shit.
Crazy.
That is so rude to East Coasters.
They did not care. It had 39.9 million viewers despite that start time, which was 10 million fewer than the previous year.
Also on a Tuesday, so it's like
on a Tuesday delayed, but still, that's a crazy amount of viewers, and it was 50 million the year before for Kramer versus Kramer.
It's 1981. What were you doing on a Tuesday night in 1981?
Oh my God, with 3 channels. Johnny Carson hosted for the 3rd time, or as they say in the intro, Oscars' master of ceremony, John Carson.
I was like, what?
I ran it back 3 times because I was like, there's no way I heard this
John.
Right. But he says John. And like you said, they bring the red carpet back. Notably, they say portions.
Well, they didn't bring it back. They've had it. They just
right.
got rid of it. But we already did those later ceremonies.
Yes. portions of it are taped, which they say, which made me laugh. Yeah. You could tell they're taped because they're so staged, the way they're walking people out. One of the things I noticed right away, tell me if you notice this, is that nowadays it's more secretive of what people are doing on the show, and this felt like it was
what they're presenting. Yeah,
this was I think the first or second person is this is the beautiful Sigourney Weaver who will present the Oscar in the best costume category, just like they're telling you what's going on.
Yeah, like Hank Sims was the announcer. So what I loved about this year, the red carpets portion was like everything he was just identifying people and was just like, that was it. Sometimes it was just like, this is Loretta Lynn.
I have a few
and then some of them I guess he had like a thesaurus by him.
Yes.
A lot of adjectives. This is the hugely talented Robert Duvall.
Yes, good
one. This is one of Hollywood's most solid and respected professionals, the distinguished Mr. Rod Steiger. And here are the singing and acting co-stars of The Wiz: glamorous Diana Ross and handsome Michael Jackson.
I wrote down 2 more. Those are great. The popular Mary Tyler Moore.
Mm-hmm. But then he said, who received her first Oscar nominee. I'm like, Hank nomination.
And this is the respected actor, Billy D. Williams.
He's respected twice. Had to recycle, I guess. Ran out of adjectives.
And Oscars master of ceremony, John Carson.
Yeah. But then so then they also did like credits?
Yes.
Went by really fast.
Very quick. And then Johnny comes out and does his he just seems fine. It was a fine monologue.
It was fine. Some good lines there, and then he tosses to the pre-tape Reagan speech.
I wrote down this part of it. I'm sure you're all here. All of you here, this made me laugh most of this part. I'm sure all of you here and most of you watching tonight understand why we delayed this program for 24 hours. Not those people you cite in Oscars, in the Inside Oscar though, Joyce. They were like,
those are the fans.
The fans are like, fuck this. You run that show now. I don't care who got shot. Run it now. Because of the incredible events yesterday, that old adage, the show must go on, seemed relatively unimportant. Then he throws to Reagan. And I got the Reagan speech transcribed. You want me to read it? I'm not going to do a Reagan impression.
If you want to.
I can't do a Reagan impression. My fellow Americans, eagerly awaiting the presentation of the 53rd Annual Academy Awards. It's surely no state secret that Nancy and I share your interest in the results of this year's balloting. We're not alone. The miracle of American technology links us with millions of moviegoers around the world. It's the motion picture that shows us all not only how we look and sound, but more important, how we feel when it achieves the most notable intent. Film reveals that people everywhere share common dreams and emotions. Tonight, I applaud all who create, make, distribute, exhibit, and attend movies. I salute the Academy for the influence its work has on the world's most enduring art form. Film is forever. I've been trapped in some film forever myself. Yuck, yuck. And as a former member of the Academy, I ask you now to join Nancy and me in enjoying this year's ceremonies.
Great line.
This reminded me of Tom Cruise after 9/11 and Nicole Kidman AMC ad. So basically, this is the same.
We love the movies. Or as Colin Farrell says in Sugar, I love the movies.
Film is forever.
Yeah, film is forever. What movie do you think he would have voted for had he remained an Academy member?
I think Ordinary People would have been his vote as a former actor.
That is totally up his alley.
Yeah, a former actor who has got the actor directing and first time, doesn't know what the hell he's doing, right? That feels very appropriate to Reagan.
and then it goes into this song and dance number.
As John Carson, Oscar's MC, says, don't hit the editing button on your Betamax.
I mean, timely joke.
Gonna save that one. And then there's a 3-minute dance number that is a calamitous to me nowadays, but probably was fine then. I don't know. It was so bad.
Not a whole lot of enthusiasm from the audience. They had these performers explain how voting works for the Oscars.
Yes.
Via song.
Yes.
So I don't know if we needed this.
Who's it for?
I guess the viewer, but it would just be better for like John Carson to explain it in like 30 seconds, right?
It's very strange, but the whole show, I mean, like, it's just it's hard to, like, certainly we can critique it, but I'm like, it's so different than the modern show because it just is like, he had a he's not even doing much. Like, there's not as much of the production values are not as high as we'd see later in the decade and then future Oscars. So it just feels like they were just like, throw a dance number in. I don't know.
Yeah, and also fewer categories back then.
Yes.
Too. So they were like, obviously he made like a length joke too, like the time the length of the show too. So it's like they're not exactly as crunched for time as they are now because there were only, I think, 20 categories.
I always think of that Bong Joon-ho quote that it's like, it's a local event, right? Or about the Oscars, right? It's like a local thing.
The Oscars are very local.
And watching this one for sure, I was like, that is what I feel like it is, because this felt like it's basically, this is like one step above a local like award ceremony for like the town. You know what I mean? Like, it's like there's no real production put into it. There's like a few cameras sprinkled around the audience to point at people. Nothing like.
But although later when Alan Arkin and Margot Kidder present, they finish presenting and then he does a bit where he's like, oh, the producers or whoever want us to greet our international fans, so we'll say hello to every country in their language, and they just go through the A's.
Torturous bit.
I was like, why?
Completely torturous.
Love you, Alan, but why?
Holy cow. So first up, best supporting actor, first award of the night. Jack Lemmon and Mary Tyler Moore coming out to present it. Nominees. And also Mary Tyler Moore presenting 2 of the 5 people in this category from her movie. This is like just red flag city. I feel like you would never do this now unless you're Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah, I mean, like I've watched a lot of these like presentations, like from older ceremonies, and like like it was like if they couldn't get the previous winner, they would just like have like whoever, and then it's just like you could give her another category. It was like, why does she need to do this?
And she does. It just felt very strange. And then the whole we don't have to go through the whole show, but I was like, we could go into the categories, but we'll start here just because it was like first up, and I was just like, it just felt like the vibe is so strange. And did she seem happy that Timothy Hutton won?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not her character in the movie.
No, I know, but she just seemed like, I feel like now it would be, maybe this is more authentic. She did seem fine. Nowadays it would be like over the top exhibiting.
Well, I mean, the other thing this year with her too was obviously the movie Ordinary People is like about the loss of her character's son, Buck.
Mm-hmm.
And a month after the movie came out in October 1980, Mary Tyler Moore's son died of a gunshot, and he was her only child, and she has said that she took this part of Beth in the movie, or she wanted this part because she knows like she made mistakes when she was like raising her son too, so she was grieving in real life. So I think it's like a lot of that too, so why she's not overly joyous, for her on-screen son win. But I mean, I think she was happy. And you know what? Like, some people just aren't like exuberant like that anyway. Like, I don't think if I presented to my co-star, I would jump up and down.
I feel like nowadays they would. But I think what you said there is true.
I think they would like probably scream or be like, yay, but I don't know. I think like I can see someone like Ke Quan doing it, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Timothy Hutton wins for Ordinary People. He's still the youngest Best Supporting Actor winner ever at 20.
He was 20. Yeah.
Not even close. I think the next youngest is Cuba Gooding Jr. at like 29 or something.
And obviously category fraud.
So
I mean, I don't care about category fraud, but it's category fraud.
We can talk about that, I guess.
Yeah.
Is it category fraud? I mean,
I think of the three of them, him, Mary, and Donald Sutherland, as the three leads. So it's like a triptych.
I think that's fair.
And I think Conrad is the main protagonist. Like, he is driving the story.
He is. So I just watched this. Literally,
I watched it last night because I love this movie, and I was like, I'm gonna watch it again.
I'd never seen Ordinary People, Joyce, ever until this year.
Oh my God, I've seen it so many times.
Never once, because I was like, I'm not gonna watch this shit. It's still Raging Bull's Oscar. Literally, that's what I thought. Like,
you're one of those people, see?
Then I watched it and I was like, wow, this rules. It's so great.
I love this movie.
But I do think a funny thing about the movie that I thought was that when it does it does have, like, you're right, it has like the three leads, and certainly I think Conrad and Beth, the Mary Tyler Moore character, are like the focal points, less so Donald Sutherland, which I think is reflected in the fact that he wasn't nominated. But when it moves off of Conrad and it goes more into like the Beth and Donald Sutherland relationship, I was just like, it's just not as compelling as when he's on the screen. So he maybe is the lead, but I'm like, I'm fine with him being supporting, and like, it's slight category fraud, but I don't know. It felt like not, I've seen worse, let's say.
I mean, I don't care that like he went supporting. Like, I think that's fine. But like, it is so. According to Screen Time Central,
yes,
he is in this movie, Timothy Hutton, for an hour and 3 minutes and 4 seconds, which is 52.49%. No one else in the category has an hour. Michael O'Keefe has 54 minutes. So that's another father-son relationship movie, The Great Santini.
What a tough beat for The Great Santini to come out the same year as Ordinary People, because I feel like he might have won if it was a different year.
I mean, for all we say about like how, like the Oscars love like young women but not young men. I mean, clearly, like, there's way more like actresses who've won in their 20s, and obviously Tatum O'Neal was like 11 when she won.
Later we'll have Mary Steenburgen here, I think is like 27 or 28.
And then yeah, but like they nominate like two young guys here this year too. So but Jason Robards was in Melvin and Howard as Howard Hughes. Great performance. For 14 minutes, 19 seconds, Judd Hirsch in Ordinary People for 18 minutes, 23 seconds. Pesci, Raging Bull, 44 minutes and 55 seconds. And then in Best Actress, Mary Tyler Moore, screen time, 32 minutes, 46 seconds, 26.44%. The smallest screen time in terms of minutes and percentage of that whole category, because the other four ladies in the category have more than an hour. So at least an hour and 15 minutes.
If Mary Tyler Moore ran supporting, do you think she would have won? That's one of the unanswerable questions of this year.
Beating, I guess we could talk about that when we get to supporting actress. Yes. But like like the supporting actor, like, I think he is a lead. I'm fine with him in supporting because it's like, who cares? And like, he's not, as I always say, he's not breaking any rules, right? Going supporting. It was a strategic move. And he would not have won in lead against Robert De Niro. So
he would never won in lead against Robert De Niro. No.
Yeah. So, and I love this performance. I think it's such a hard role to pull off for someone that young too, like this teenager, suicidal teenager, grief-stricken teenager, and there's so much angst and vulnerability, and he has to do a lot in the movie too, and he interacts with basically everyone.
He's absolutely fantastic in the movie. It's like, I think it's one of the all-time like young guy performances. It reminded me a lot, obviously, like, these are the like Lucas Hedges and Manchester, right? Or Good Will Hunting, I thought of too, like Matt and Good Will Hunting. Those are the two movies I was like, oh, having never seen this movie like an idiot. I
I
was
can't
like, oh,
believe you've
these
never
guys are
seen
just
Ordinary People.
I was like, oh, these guys are just ripping off Timothy Hutton completely. Like Lucas is a copy of a copy because he's ripping off Matt and Good Will Hunting,
Like Multiplicity.
who is ripping off Timothy Hutton in Ordinary People. Down to like the Judd Hirsch as Robin Williams character. I love Judd Hirsch in this movie so much. I thought he was so good. It's like amazingly good. This is an awesome. This is like probably I was gonna say, is this my favorite acting category of this night? They're all of these are really good, but I actually think this is the best one because I love Michael O'Keefe and Great Santini is great, and it's a great year for Michael O'Keefe because he was in Caddyshack, Joyce, as well.
Mhm.
Danny Noonan, who could forget? And then loved seeing him years later in Michael Clayton, just fantastic in Michael Clayton.
Great film.
And
But
Joe
the best part was when they were announcing the nominees, and then they do the boxes for each person. So when they read Michael O'Keefe's name, they actually showed him. But
Yes.
then when they put him in the little box, they showed someone else.
Yes.
And it was Martin Scorsese.
I think I sent you the screenshot.
Yes.
It's incredible. We'll talk about this. Not to read into too much, like you said, like who knows what people are going through. Martin Scorsese looked fucking mad the whole night. You know, you don't really, if you watch the show again, you don't really see Marty showing his poker face as much as he does.
I think like he knew he was gonna lose. I mean, we can talk about this like with Best Director later.
Yes,
but
he knew he was
like,
going to lose, and he seemed annoyed that he was going to lose. Even though I know he likes Redford and they work together later on Quiz Show and all these different things. I'm not like, I just think he wasn't annoyed with Redford winning. I think he was annoyed. We can talk about this later, but he definitely does not seem happy at all to be there. So, Timothy Hutton, great speech. Loved it. Loved him winning. Love this movie. Joyce says, I think I wrote on Letterboxd, you know what's a good movie? Ordinary People. People are right, as it turns out.
Again, I can't believe you haven't seen this movie.
I just was like on strike against the movie.
This is the problem when like just the discourse takes over and then you are brainwashed to believe that like the discourse is correct when you haven't done the research yourself.
And especially with these, I absolutely agree. And especially these 80s movies, it's like, who's going to go back and rewatch? Who even cares to rewatch or reconsider these things, right, at the time? Like, again.
Well, I think a lot of people, I mean, if you do your due diligence, you would. It's like, let me watch the movie and form my own opinion on it instead of just, piggybacking off the groupthink and agreeing that this movie sucks ass and Raging Bull was robbed. And then like if you don't like Ordinary People, that's fine, but at least you saw it and you have your reasons and your opinion. But I think now also people are lazy and they don't want to do that. So it's just easier to just be an internet warrior anonymously, just typing away and like raging against this movie.
I'm not out there raging against the movie. I'm just saying.
No, but it's just like you don't feel like incentivized to do anything about it because like you've been told over and over again for years, for 44 years now, that Raging Bull was the better movie. And
we're still being told that even now. I looked up, like, I think there was an Esquire interview with Marty earlier this year, and Thelma was quoted. She's still sore over this.
She also, I have that interview pulled up, and she says she has not seen Ordinary People.
I'm gonna read it right here. I think he would have liked to have won for we're gonna do this later for Best Director, but since we're talking about this, the discourse of it, I think he would have liked to win one for Raging Bull. When we were standing there, those of us who did win, I was waiting for Marty to come with his Oscar, and he didn't. It was the worst night of my life. It was devastating that he didn't win. A movie like that is so brilliantly directed, but it was a tough movie. And Ordinary People, I understand it's a very good movie. I've never seen it. I'm like, even Thelma is like, no way.
Yeah, and I think it's also like now we have just really intense stan culture. So there's obviously a lot of Marty heads.
Yeah, that's the other reason, right?
No one Redford heads.
Right. Nobody's going to bat for Ordinary People on social media. Nobody's like, it's a great movie, Ordinary People.
Yeah, but Ordinary People has a lot of fans.
It's good. It's very, very good. So Timothy Hutton wins. I didn't write down a lot of other people, Joyce. Did you have anybody else for supporting actor? Well, then we'll go to Best Picture and Best Director, I guess. But
I have Bill Murray for Caddyshack.
I did too. Never in a million years it happened though. Come on.
No, but it was fun. It would be fun. And I have Levon Helm for Coal Miner's Daughter
Hmm.
and Sam Shepard for Resurrection.
Nice. I had Scott Wilson for the Ninth Configuration. And
A Golden Globe nominee.
yes,
They really like the ninth configuration over
yes.
there.
You a big fan of that one, Joyce? Seen that a
Yeah,
lot? And then Dabney Coleman for 9 to 5 just felt like an obvious
that would
option.
be fun. Hmm.
But yeah, again, not as much. I'm not gonna go like Harrison Ford for Star Wars or Scatman Crothers for Shining. I don't think those would
Do
make it.
you because obviously a lot of Raging Bull heads also think Pesci should have won.
So I rewatched Raging Bull and First Time Ordinary People. Uh, Raging Bull is a phenomenal movie. I was like, oh, I hadn't seen it in a long time, so I was like, maybe it's like one of those like film bro college dorm room movies, and it's not going to really age well. And it's great. It's so good. I don't think Pesci should have won. I think he's really good in it, but I don't think he should have won. I think he winning for Goodfellas feels like the better win. And I don't think there's really anybody else who I would have nominated from the movie besides the three who got in. But I don't
Yeah.
think Pesci should have won. Definitely not over Timothy Hutton. Timothy Hutton's incredible in this movie.
Yeah, I don't think he should have won either. I think that's just a lot of just,
I, I,
like
I would say like I would have. I don't know how. I mean, this is like I said. I think this is a really strong category. Like all five of these performances are great. So I would probably have Pesci third or fourth if I was actually ranking them. Even though I think he's fantastic in it.
yeah, I wouldn't have him. I mean, I didn't think about this at all, but I mean, I really like Jason Robards in
He's great.
Melvin and Howard. I haven't watched that in a while, but
He's so good in
it's
it.
like so, not a lot of screen time, but just really great as Howard Hughes. Michael O'Keefe is also, I haven't seen that in a while either. Great
And,
Santini. So,
and
and
Judd in Ordinary
Judd was
People.
obviously never gonna win
No,
against.
but he's fantastic in the movie.
No,
That's
but
what I'm
like he was
saying.
never
Like,
gonna win. Like
no,
he was
no,
just like,
obviously.
um, and so yeah, this is like, one of, I think like supporting actor in general can be a very like not just kind of like forgettable category and with some forgettable winners too. And this is not one of them, even if you're someone who thinks he is in the wrong category and should have been in lead.
I never felt like, again, as a person who's just seen this recently, I didn't feel that at all. I was like, I do feel like it's a supporting performance. You could argue they're all leads, and then maybe they're all supporting in that way too. You know what I mean? Like the screen time, obviously, he does have like a lot of screen time. Certainly, that's undeniable and factual. But I'm like, it does feel like he's okay to win for supporting. It doesn't feel like that much of a fraud to me. But and like you said, who
Yeah,
cares?
like I don't think it's like it doesn't bother me.
No,
It's just
no.
like I do think he's a lead and I'm fine with him winning and supporting. So because I don't care about category fraud.
Uh, so we could just do. I guess we'll go through, and we can come back to the show. I only wrote down a few other notes about the show. I don't know about. Do you have a lot of notes about the show? We'll get to them, I guess, as we do these
Well,
categories.
why don't we just do supporting actress next?
Okay. Uh,
You just
supporting
went out of
actress.
order, so
It's fine. So supporting actress Mary Steenburgen wins for Melvin and Howard. The other nominees are Eileen Brennan for Private Benjamin, Ava La Gallienne for Resurrection, Kathy Moriarty for Raging Bull, and Diana Scarwood for Inside Moves. Uh, great. Sis, what do you think?
I mean Mary was always winning.
Mm-hmm.
She I mean it's such a winning performance. She's just so daffy and goofy and charming in the movie. And yeah, she was sweeping everything. So this was hers. She was this was fittingly since she came back to present this year in the same coat as she wore when she won. She was like the Dave Joy Randolph of the year, just
Yeah,
winning everything.
it remind again as it she's like I think she's like 28 or 29 right when she wins this. She's a young actor obviously like, and it just felt like again like a kind of classic like Oscar win for like a light, like you said, like bubbly, like a goofy, not goofy, but you know what I mean, like light performance, right? Or like, fun win, a fun win. Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny, a fun. We're having fun.
And like the movie was like more embraced than I mean I guess you could say Raging Bull, but they clearly did not like Raging Bull that much, even though it had more nominations. But I think Melvin and Howard is the type of movie that's like more their speed than Raging Bull. So
And
even though it didn't make Best Picture, but I think it would have had it been a field of 10. So and yeah, like I don't think like Eileen Brennan and Private Benjamin, fun performance. She would go on to star in the TV spinoff and win an Emmy and a Globe.
nice.
So, and then like Eva Le Gallienne for Resurrection, yeah, fine. Like she and Ellen Burstyn, they were the Naiad of the year. I have a quote from Ellen Burstyn later. Kathy Moriarty, who was like 17 or something when she did Raging Bull, like good, but I don't think I would have given it to her. I have not seen Inside Move, so I have no comment on Diana Scarlett.
I haven't either. So tough beat. Kathy Moriarty in Raging Bull is freaking awesome. She's so good. I don't think she should have won either, but like, man, she's so great. And I was like, love her in that. Ava Le Gallienne, I think, was the oldest nominee in this category for almost a decade, or maybe more.
Until Gloria Stewart.
So that's great. Yeah, it just felt like Mary kind of undeniable, and even her speech was really nice too. And she gave a great shout out to Jack for going south, which I just loved.
Yeah, that was like her big break basically,
Right.
and then she had just or she was at that time married to Malcolm McDowell, and they had just had a kid.
She shouts out Malcolm in the thing. I was
Yeah.
like, well, all right.
I know. But it's
Melvin
funny
Howard
because like the last thing she says is like when she like gives a shout out to him, she's like, "You make me feel like tap dancing."
Yeah.
But the way she says it, it sounds like Ted Danson.
He's foreshadowing. Melvin Howard, another movie that I think has like a lot of this. It feels like a formative year for Paul Thomas Anderson because we were talking about Punch Drunk Love and Popeye. But I was like, oh, Melvin Howard, like he totally redoes Melvin Howard for The Master. Like the scene of on the bike is like a reference to Melvin Howard. So I was like, man, PTA was thriving this year. He was like watching movies and loving life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so the other people I wrote down, Beverly D'Angelo for Coal Miner's Daughter.
I had her too. I felt like
Patsy Cline. She's not in it a lot.
That feels like what we would say maybe a snub. I don't know who she could have replaced, but it felt like, especially because they like Coal Miner's Daughter, it feels like she would have gotten a coattail nomination.
Well, it was funny because Coal Miner's Daughter could have gotten a lot more acting nominations than it did. Like Tommy Lee Jones was also snub. It just got in for Sissy for acting. So yeah, so I feel like that was like a missed coattail for obviously, Deborah Winger, we said. Wendy Hiller in The Elephant Man. I also like Pamela Reed and Melvin Howard as the second wife. It's also good, but I think this wasn't one of the years where it was like a consensus like pair of supporting actresses that get in and like one wins. It was just like no, it was just like one of them the whole time. And sorry to the other person. I also wrote down Ann Mira for Fame.
Where would you? I guess we'll get to it. 9 to 5. How would you have split these three for 9 to 5? I have them all just in lead because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and I would have just done Dolly.
Dolly for supporting, right? You can make the case, or Dolly for lead.
No, Dolly for lead.
Yeah, same. But I don't think any of them would have been supporting though. I don't know.
No, I would have just done all of them lead.
Yeah. Okay. How about Deborah Winger for Urban Cowboy? Did we talk about her?
Well, I mean, I had her as like one of them. Did you?
Yeah. I had her as one of them too. That's it though. All right. So do you want to do Best Picture then, or where do you want to go next? We can do whatever we want.
Just go up.
So the next one is Best Actor. Robert De Niro for Raging Bull. No kidding.
I have a quote here from the New York Times. About like the delay basically. Well, it's kind of this was clearly like an updated story about the delay, and then like up top they just added like the winners from the night.
Okay.
Because Academy Award balloting closed more than a week ago, none of the agony the last 24 hours will have an effect on who eventually wins. Several weeks ago, Hollywood executives were saying, quote, they might as well wrap the Oscar up and mail it to Bobby De Niro. With only a few hours left before the winners are announced, Hollywood has not changed its mind.
So this is like a absolutely foundational performance. I feel like that many actors have continued to rip off for decades.
And then
right?
it's like one of those ones. It's like it's like the poster child for like transformative performances, right? Like you bulk up, you put on the weight, you lose the weight, everything.
Christian Bale's whole career is like this performance, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It's like Leo and Revenant.
it is an incredible performance. No shit. I mean, like, you're not gonna say who's gonna say anything new about Robert De Niro in Raging Bull. I guess the thing I was like watching, I was like, wow, this is literally the last time he'll ever win an Oscar. That was my thought. I was like, he never will win again. And it's crazy that this was so long ago, right? 1981. We're talking again.
Yeah, because he already won supporting for Godfather Part Two.
And he'll never win again. And he probably will never win again. No disrespect to the great Robert De Niro. But I mean, this past year was probably his best chance to ever win based on Flower Moon, and he was never going to win. So like it just is a crazy thing to think about. But man, it is hard to overstate how good he is in Raging Bull. He's so good. He has no like vanity obviously at all, or any kind of interest. He is like Jake LaMotta is presented as such a piece of shit the whole time. And it made me laugh that Jake LaMotta is there and like kind of like, hey,
And
here
then
I
he
am.
like, was it him who referenced the lawsuit?
He mentioned
Joey.
Joey
Joey.
LaMotta is Jake's brother is suing us, and De Niro's like, I'd love to go to dinner with him still, maybe again someday. Man, he is so good in this movie. It is like classic, effortless De Niro. It's so effortless, and like yet he obviously is doing so much work beyond like the physicality and the boxing. Man, he is so good, and like I was just blown away, and it's honestly like this is another incredible category. Like, don't you think another year John Hurt would have just easily won for Elephant Man
I mean,
if it wasn't De
maybe,
Niro?
but like, I'm not a huge fan of that performance. I feel like I feel like the makeup did a lot of the heavy lifting
I
there.
guess, yeah.
I think like, if Bobby were not here, I think Hero Tool could have won. I really like that performance. And I love the stuntman. I haven't seen that in a while either, but it was like it's such like a magic trick of a film. And I thought he was really fun. And then like Duvall too, I think, this like he would win eventually, this decade. So I think it could have been him too. I've never seen Tribute, Jack
Me
Lemmon.
neither, and actually wanted to watch it because it sounds fantastic. Directed by Bob Clark, who people might know as the guy who did Christmas Story, Porky's, Black Christmas. The logline for this is Jack Lemmon as Scotty Templeton, a terminally ill Broadway agent trying to make amends with his family and friends. Absolutely, fuck yeah, this sounds great. I was like in immediately, like gotta find this one to watch.
Um, but yeah, this was just always De Niro, and then like obviously like the whole like narrative, I guess back then, if they even called it a narrative back then, was just his transformation and everything. So there's a bunch of quotes in here about like his diet in Inside
Okay,
Oscar. So he says, I just can't fake acting. I know movies are an illusion, and maybe the first rule is to fake it, but not for me. I am too curious. I want to deal with all the facts of the character, thin or fat. So it's about him like training, blah blah blah. And then, obviously production shut down for 4 months, so he could gain 56 pounds. Um, and then so this section is called a meaty roll, and roll spelled ROLL.
excellent.
It says, when De Niro tipped the scales at 225 pounds, Life magazine came around with cameras clicking. Quote, it didn't interfere with my sex life, the star assured the magazine. I mean, some women never gave me a look unless they find out who I am. But believe it or not, some liked me fat, though I was a big teddy bear. One girl who dissented was his 5-year-old daughter. My daughter was so terribly embarrassed for her friends to see me after I looked like an animal. So
This is a
yeah.
movie that De Niro basically manifested, right? Like I don't think he's actually a credited producer on the movie. I'm not
There's so
sure.
many cases here where Robert Redford is also not a producer on like Ordinary People, and then like we'll talk about it later, but like it's like I feel like like in this day and age there'll be a lot more producers.
So De Niro certainly would have been a producer. He
Yeah.
read the autobiography during Godfather Part 2, I believe. and was like, the book isn't great, but I love Jake, and he wanted to make it with Scorsese, and Scorsese kept being like, no, 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 no. Scorsese almost died from a drug overdose, and then like basically like De Niro, they made this like save Scorsese. I think he's talked about this probably frequently in other interviews, right? And like it is like De Niro just pushing this thing up a hill basically with Irwin Winkler and Robert Chardoff, who are the producers, and Scorsese, and they like kind of like Scorsese didn't want to do it because he was like, I don't like boxing, I don't like sports, but he kind of really related to Jake as a character, which at that time is very dark, but also like I could see him thinking that, right? And like the idea, it fits so well with like a Scorsese of the era, that era of Scorsese, I feel like. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
and
like,
then like De Niro also got Joe Pesci.
mhm.
Like he wanted him, so he pursued him. So yeah, he did like all the like the groundwork that a producer would do. So like in this day and age, he definitely would have gotten a producer credit.
The funny thing about Pesci, and I guess you could say this with like obviously Timothy Hutton was like a fresh actor, right? Like complete like like Pesci too though was basically like kind of like at it. Like the thing that I love about him in Raging Bull, while I don't think he should have won, is that it's like he's just immediately that guy. Like it feels like he's been famous for 100 years watching it. You're just like, oh, there's no learning curve here. He's just so perfect, and that has carried through like the rest of his performances. Like he just is immediately great. He just has that thing with his presence is so perfect. And
Yeah,
listen, I
and I
can see
think
him
like
fake that.
he has really like maximized like the wheelhouse of his style or like roles that fit him. Like speaking of typecasting, and
Yeah.
I mean like one of my things with the film is like it gets kind of repetitive of like all the arguments and everything. So, but yeah, this is like a good starter nomination for him for
Yeah.
Goodfellas 10 years later.
And and like we said, for De Niro, it's like this is it. It just is shot. I was just like, wow, I can't believe like he never had that Meryl Iron Lady win. You know what I mean? Like there was never a movie that he did that was just like, and here's your third one, fuck it,
It's
basically.
also interesting of like their trajectories because she will obviously win her second for Sophie's Choice this decade,
Mhm.
um and she's just been accumulating nominations like left and right, and I wouldn't say like her projects have her picks in projects haven't been as poor as De Niro's, like they might be mid, but like he's done a lot of schlock, and I think that's kind of colored people's perception of him
Yeah.
and whether he quote deserves a third Oscar. And he got the nom for Silver Linings Playbook, but wasn't winning that. And then now, Flower Moon. Um,
What
I think in like some different universe, like he could have won,
I
but
absolutely think he could
not
have.
this one.
Yeah. The thing is, and I feel like this is with Meryl too, even though obviously she's won within like the last like 15 years, 12 years, whatever it was. But like it feels like De Niro has won more than he has, maybe. That's the other thing. You know what I mean? Like I just think like he's got those two Oscars. People obviously remember Raging Bull. I think it's that performance, like you said, we're setting is still talked about as like this like North Star for a lot of actors, in terms of transformation and commitment. And then you're just like, oh, and he doesn't need another Oscar, but it's like, oh, he really has never. I mean, maybe he hasn't deserved one, like we said. Like I think Flower Moon was like his best shot, but he wasn't gonna win. But yeah, just wild. Uh,
Yeah.
who else do
So,
you have here as other
well,
nominees?
obviously the big snub was Donald Sutherland. So
Yes.
there's a quote in here too about his snub. Um, says except Donald Sutherland, who told the Today Show the next day, quote, "I'm not surprised. I know that community and I didn't expect a nomination."
Wow.
That's kind of like similar energy as Marty when he's like, like they don't get me.
He's great. I thought Donald Sutherland, Ordinary
He's
People.
I think he missed because he's like the straight man performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
so.
mean now he has an honorary Oscar. I think it sucks more that he's never been nominated like for anything. So
Do you think Tommy Lee Jones is a more egregious snub?
not really. I mean, I wrote him down, but I would nominate Donald first. I also
Mhm.
wrote down Jack for The Shining.
So I think now Jack for the Shining would be an easy one to think and manifest, but then I guess the movie just wasn't as,
Yeah,
obviously
it was
not
not. It,
considered
it
as
it's a again one of those films that's been relitigated. I wrote down Paul for
same.
Melvin and Howard.
I have Richard Gere for American Gigolo. and Al Pacino for Cruising, both of which I think would have more shine now than they did then.
Yeah.
Who else? Oh, John Travolta, Urban Cowboy. Robert Redford for Brubaker. You ever seen that one? It's good.
Yeah, I think that's all I have. But I mean, it didn't matter who wasn't here because Bobby was winning.
Always. For Best Actress, this is another one that feels like
just Sissy.
Always winning, right? Sissy Spacek wins for Coal Miner's Daughter as Loretta Lynn. Biopics dominating already, just real life people. That's the easiest way to win. It still remains the easiest way to win an Oscar. Play somebody who's a real life person. We see it over and over again. Other nominees are Ellen Burstyn for Resurrection, Goldie Hawn for Private Benjamin, Mary Tyler Moore for Ordinary People, like we said, and Jana Rollins for Gloria.
And Loretta Lynn basically manifested Sissy being or playing her because she had never seen any of her movies, and she was just looking through headshots and she's like her.
It's awesome.
I haven't seen this movie in a while either, but I think she is better than the movie, but I think the movie itself, like I said, is better than most biopics.
Right.
And I think her performance is also better than a lot of musician biopic performances. She does do her own singing, but she is also just so believable as a 13-year-old Loretta Lynn.
It's
kind of
remarkable.
Insane.
Yeah. She won. It reminded me. She looked like, and I was just like, this would be like Sadie Sink winning an Oscar now. That's what I was thinking of. I was like, what if Sadie Sink won an
Remember when
Oscar?
you predicted her for The Whale?
I had her in there for a little bit. That's what it would feel like. This is what it would feel like, because she looked, like you said, she is so young looking, and she is young in real. I mean, she's young then. I think she's
a beautiful woman, and I think she has such a unique look.
Mm-hmm.
To where she's not she again very beautiful, but not conventionally attractive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I don't think she looks like anyone else, any other actress out there, and she was just really great as Loretta, and I think it's a really good win. And I think this is one of those years where you have two really, really strong and kind of career defining performances up against each other, her and Mary Tyler Moore. And it just sucks they had to compete in the same year.
I also say, we've seen this historically. Mary Tyler Moore, we would say, is playing a difficult woman or an unlikable woman.
Yeah, it's such a great performance, though.
She's fantastic, but I would say, Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at least is presented as a villain, and here I think she's almost too well-rounded. So I feel like people would be that very inherent sexism and bias, I think, would have prevented her from winning, even if
she's not an outright villain, but she has villainous qualities to her, but that's only because she cannot process her grief. Beth just can't do that, and that's why she's so remote and brittle and distant from her remaining son. And and she's going through it too. And I think one of her best moments is at the end when after Donald Sutherland tells her, I don't think I love you anymore, and she goes up to pack, and then she lets out that gasp, and it's all of her repressed emotion, everything, grief and her anger and even her love for her family, because I think she does love her family, and she just does not know how to express it, and she's just one of those people, I think, of that time and generation too, where everything needs to be picture perfect. And her world got destabilized when her son died, and he was clearly her favorite son, her favorite child. And she's trying to act like everything's the same, and her husband and son are no, they're not the same. It's not the same anymore, and she just can't adapt. And it's really a great performance. And yeah, I agree. I don't know if she would have won without Sissy being there, but she definitely would have had a better shot. I don't think this was close at all in the final vote. I think she was second, but I don't think it was close. And I do think she probably could have won in supporting.
So that's
because I think they're more open to those types of performances, down there.
I think she probably could have won, especially because they did love Melvin and Howard. Obviously, won a screenplay award too, right? So they clearly had an affection for that movie and Mary. and she steamrolled in quotes because it's a different time. But I don't know. I think Mary Tyler Moore could have won supporting if she was there.
Yeah, she won the Globe in drama
Yeah.
because back then they had a Coal Miner's Daughter and comedy musical.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
much of either. It had music,
it has music.
but it's not a musical. So
There's an old you can barely find this, but EW did a big oral history of ordinary people for an anniversary, and they talk about the Oscars. And Mary Tyler Moore said, "I was thrilled for Redford and Tim and for everyone. Best Picture is about the contributions of every one of the people listed in the credits. So while I was personally disappointed that I did not win, having the chance to work with such an extraordinary group was reward enough for me." Very, very diplomatic and classy.
yeah. And I don't think like she was like surprised either not to
She
win.
didn't look very surprised.
No,
No.
but
I
who
think
was surprised? Sissy Spacek's dad.
thrilled.
So, um, says in here, her parents were watching at home in Quitman, Texas, where her father told the Dallas Times Herald, quote, "I hate to see Mary Tyler Moore lose because she's always been one of my real favorites, but there she was, pitted against Sissy. We were a little worried there."
Awesome.
Yeah, and this was a, obviously against type turn for Mary.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows her obviously from her show and
Mm-hmm.
Dick Van Dyke. So, I think it just kind of sucks that this was her only nomination.
What else would she have been nominated for?
I don't know.
That's the
I
thing.
don't think like there was anything else really. I don't
Right.
know. I think it's like, you just kind of hope that there's more, I mean, I don't know what it was like back then because I wasn't around. But I think that's kind of like the feeling when people get their first nomination and they don't win, and you want to see them come back and eventually win, especially if they lost for such a strong performance.
This year, I mean, like we're seeing in these categories, these are incredible. Like the winners are seemingly very obvious, right? These 4 acting winners, there's no doubt about these, and I think they've all aged. None of these have aged poorly, to me at least, right? Like they're all like still
No.
great performances, but all of the alternates would have also been great winners. It feels like, and you could say uh, maybe in a different year they could have won, right? Like everyone, like all the like Mary Tyler Moore, I guess would you say like Robert Duvall maybe or John Hurt for actor, and then like any of these actors for supporting actor would have been a great win. And then like I don't know, Eileen Brennan I think is great in Private Benjamin, or maybe Kathy Moriarty for Raging Bull and supporting actress. That would have both of those would have aged well if they had won. You wouldn't be like, oh, that was weird that they won.
Yeah, like the worst criticism you can have of any of the acting winners is that like Timothy is a fraud in supporting.
Right. This had a lot, I had like a decent amount, like we mentioned before, for extra or alternate nominees. Though I don't know who I really would have bumped out because I do think this is a really very strong category. And I think you were you going to mention? Did you have a Naiad reference here coming up for Ellen Burstyn, or was that just it?
Oh, well, yeah, because the Resurrection just got those 2
Yes.
noms, Best
Yes.
Actress, Supporting Actress,
Yes.
and I love Ellen Burstyn, Queen, and
Yes.
since the movie has been so for the past 44 years, basically, she has been very vocal about how Universal fucked over Resurrection.
Mhm.
Um, uh, so this is an interview from in The Guardian from November 4th, 2000. And so she's talking about the film, and then basically, like a lot of films this year, made no money, and Universal pulled it because they also had Coal Miner's Daughter.
Mhm.
So she says, it wasn't very successful because at the time Universal had no faith in it, and they had another film, which I won't mention, that they had already released and made a lot of money from with an actress in it who they felt had a good opportunity to win the Best Actress award. And my reviews said, quote, just as so-and-so looked to have a clear shot at the Oscar, along comes Ellen Burstyn in Resurrection, end quote. So Universal made an executive decision to put all their money behind the film that they thought was very successful. And it was, and she did win. Laughter. They pulled Resurrection out of the theaters, so it was running in New York, and I was nominated for the Oscar, and there was no ad in the newspapers to say it was running. So it was literally killed, which is a very painful experience, when you love a piece of work and it comes out the way you want it to come out and people like it, but the studio decides to kill it. That's one of the glories of show business.
Wow.
Yeah, she's
Love
talked
her.
about this over and over again.
That's really good.
Yeah.
This like for extra other people. So we mentioned Dolly and like maybe the whole 9 to 5 group. The other people I had Natasha Kinski for Tess feels like a clear
Yeah,
miss.
she was a miss there. She was probably very
Six.
close.
And how about Irene Cara for Fame?
I have her down too.
I
Yes.
feels like this is like the most competitive of the categories because I think both of them could have easily gotten in. Fame with I think 6 nominations we said, or they liked it, won 2 Oscars.
I don't know if it needed score, but like definitely song for sure.
Maybe we could do song later. I was like, that's a really competitive category. Like
It
3
was.
classic songs, like
Yeah.
the Fame theme, like Fame
Listen,
and
we used to have great songs in movies, okay?
9 to 5, Dolly Parton, right? 9 to 5, and like I said, On the Road Again, just an absolute classic. Like that's like that's like New York, New York is like a classic. Like you don't even realize it's from a movie classic kind of thing. Uh, yeah, Tess, Natasha Kinski for Tess, I think would have been, and I have Shelley Duvall for The Shining, but obviously no, never.
No, I am happy for her that because she was nominated at the Razzies for this, but they've since rescinded a nomination after, came out that she was tormented on set, basically.
The
So
Razzies suck, Joyce.
they do suck. Yeah.
Uh, Best Director, Robert Redford wins for Ordinary People. The other nominees are David Lynch, who looked like 20 years old in the Oscar clip. Marty for Raging Bull, Richard Rush for Stuntman, and Roman Polanski for Tess. Polanski not present, Joyce, as you might imagine.
We haven't even mentioned him yet.
Tess not like a movie that I'm like super. There are other Roman Polanski movies I'm more interested in, like Chinatown and Rosemary's Baby, certainly, and Frantic.
Yeah. Well, this is obviously his I don't can you call it a comeback? I don't know.
Comeback.
Like his first like big thing since he fled
Yes.
from the US.
Yeah.
So and the movie did very well here.
It won a cinematography Oscar. I mean, yeah, cinematography, art direction, or both.
Yeah, it won multiple. I think it won
And
3 altogether.
costumes.
Yeah, costumes too. Yeah. But so one thing about this category, everyone here, great hair.
Fantastic hair. Hair used to be a lot better, Joyce.
Yeah. I was just like, what is your conditioner? Like everyone, not just Robert Redford, like just voluminous hair.
Even Marty.
Yeah, Marty had the beard going too. But I know a lot of people do not approve of this win, but I don't have issue with Robert Redford winning this.
Here's what I would say. I'm not sure what, like, when you watch the movie, I don't know if I think Robert Redford's a great director watching this movie. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know what. I think what he brought to this movie is comfort level with the cast. And like the reason the movie works is because the ensemble is so great together and all of these people are giving incredible performances. So I don't think you could just discount that. But there's nothing really in the movie that I would say is like cinematic in a way, right? You know what I mean? Like or like groundbreaking, or it just is like it feels like point and shoot a lot of the times. Like not to be too dismissive of what he's doing, but to be dismissive of what he's doing. Whereas Raging Bull is very, very like Marty, like with the safety off, kind of like going nuts. And it's so good. So if it's split and like Ordinary People won Best Picture and he won Best Director, that would have been fine. And I think Redford winning is cool. Who doesn't like Robert Redford? I mean, come on. But I do think maybe Marty would have been a choice here. It's not as bad as Dance with Wolves and Kevin Costner to me, though. So
No, I think he should have won then. But I think it's like you're basically like prioritizing when you're talking about Marty, like the filmmaking of it, and obviously it's a lot more flashy and in your face, and I think that's what people respond to. It's more thrilling, right? And it is a lot like like for lack of a better word, like experimental, so it feels exciting, and I think it's also a movie like if when you if it feels like it's better than it is when you think about it too, when you talk about it, right? Than when you actually watch it. This is like probably blasphemous and like all the Raging Bullheads will hate me, but like that's kind of how I feel about it. When like I do think like he does a lot of really insane things in the film, but I personally was just not like taken by the story necessarily. I think like the visual language is really fun. Um, but I don't think it's like as cohesive like as a film altogether as Ordinary People, which is, it doesn't have boxing fights or anything or like wild cinematography. It's not in black and white. It's called literally Ordinary in the title. I think that's part of it too. It's like the titles make people like perceive these movies in a different way. Like
Mhm.
Raging is so exciting, and Ordinary People is like telling you like this is mundane and quotidian. Um, but yeah, it's just like or at the time contemporary family drama. But I think like what you're saying about Robert Redford getting these beautiful performances out of these actors counts for a lot, right? Like people are moved by this movie, people love this movie because of these performances. It doesn't have these stylistic flashes like a Raging Bull does. So I think that is of value when you're talking about directing, because I think you, as a director, you need to get these performances out of your actors, especially when it is such a performance-based film. So I don't have an issue with him winning. And obviously back then, like director and picture were way
Always
more
on.
linked than it
Yes.
is now. So
The one thing watching it, the other reason I'm like, of course Redford was gonna win, just because like when you have Marty like dark and like kind of like unhappy Marty versus movie star Redford, watching them announce Best Director and Redford like bouncing up there to win. It reminded me of this quote from about The Graduate that Mike Nichols has told this story a million times, but that Redford wanted to play Ben in The Graduate, that's Dustin Hoffman character, and Nichols said, I said you can play it. You never play a loser. And Redford said, "What do you mean? Of course I can play a loser." And I said, "Okay, have you ever struck out with a girl?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And he wasn't joking. That's watching it, I just felt like that because I was like, there's no way he was ever gonna lose. Like, it's Robert fucking Redford. Of course he won, like, over Marty. It doesn't matter what the movie is. Like, who would not want Robert Redford in 1981 to win an Oscar for this? It's just very funny to me. I was just like, of course he won.
and then also like it wasn't a surprise or anything because he won the
No,
Globe, he won
no.
DGA.
No,
So
it just is like, of course he was going to win. I guess Marty, like watching it, I felt like Marty was more annoyed. And like we said, like later, like Marty's he's so great in Quiz Show. It's a great performance, like in Redford's Quiz Show. And I'm sure they're friendly or were at least some point. Who knows if these people are real friends or anything. But I was like, he definitely seemed annoyed that he had to sit there the whole time to lose. Like he got much better at that. He's gotten much better at that doing it, having done it a lot of
because he's
times.
talked a lot about like his relationship with the Oscars over the years, and this was still kind of like the
Well, it's his first directing nomination, right?
mhm. uh
Or was he nominated for Taxi Driver?
yeah, was it?
Take a look.
I'm like I'm like you just made me question it. I was like Taxi Driver. Yeah, this is his first one because it was
So,
76. 70, it was because that was Rocky, Network,
mhm.
All the President's Men, and then Lena Wertmuller.
Mhm. So this is his
Um
first one. So
yeah,
he's
and then who was the last
to
one in
gotten
76?
used to losing, excuse me.
Um who was the last one? Oh, Ingmar Bergman, duh, okay. Yeah, so like this was still like the early days of his relationship with the Oscars.
Mhm.
So, and he's talked over the years about like how he has just realized that like his style just doesn't jive with what they like.
Right.
So he's like accepted that, and that's why he had no fucks to give of The Departed. That was just like a fun flick. They had no intention of ever campaigning or like no Oscar aspirations, and then that's when he won, and the film was embraced, and it also won Best Picture. So
It's funny when you watch like this and like then what again, like as he gets later into this, like it just is like when he wins the party, he's like, like kind of like shrug, and he's always like, fuck it, I don't know, like whatever. And I'm like, you can really see the seeds of that forming here, where he like obviously was very upset to have lost this probably, and Thelma Schoonmaker like has said like obviously made sure that that was true, right? Because of or has at least said that. Um, but yeah, I was like, there was no way he was ever going to lose. And like you said, Redford dominated the whole thing and was like clear. Like this is like this is a funny one, Oscars, because like Ordinary People, I think, what did we say, had how many nominations? 6 nominations, I believe, right? Or but it just dominated these above the line categories, like those last.
And then obviously remember like the stat that everyone loved to cite. It was until Birdman, it was the last film to win Best Picture with no editing nomination.
Yes.
So an editing went to Raging Bull,
If
obviously.
if Ordinary People was in the editing category, would it have won over Raging Bull?
Back then, I mean, like maybe.
Probably, right?
So you know what's funny? So it was edited by Jeff Canoe,
Mhm.
and his son is Justin Canoe, who's been on The Amazing Race twice. And I interviewed him for Tar. And then like the first time, they came in fourth place, him and Zev. And so like before we started, I was like, I want to let you know, like, I love Ordinary People. Like, I was
That's
like, please
awesome.
tell your dad.
That's great.
So, yeah, I think it could have won that too. I mean, sometimes they do go with like the flashier editing,
Right.
but
Who else did you have here for Redford? Other directors in the category,
for
or just that who could have gotten nominated?
directing, Michael Apted, obviously, for Coal Miner's Daughter.
That was the top one for me.
Is it? You know, it got into Best Picture, missed. Demi for Melvin and Howard.
Yes.
I also, this would never happen, but I also wrote down the trio from Airplane.
Wow. That would have been hot. I love that.
Just because like it would have been 3 directors. It was Jim Abrams, David and Jerry Zucker.
I have Alan Parker for Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Akira Kurosawa. And Stanley Kubrick and Michael Cimino for Notorious Flop, that I think nowadays would have been more considered, but obviously never then.
Mm-hmm. It like also like what they did here, because the lone nominee was Richard Rush for the Stuntman, because Stuntman didn't make Best Picture, although it probably would have been over 10. Like that's like, you know, the Wrecking Bench like still they've always done this stuff, you know.
Always. It's very funny looking
Like
at this
their
and it's
pick.
like, oh,
Yeah.
the themes
Like
are
we don't do the director of the biopic.
the themes are so obvious over and over again. It really is funny, no matter how far away you get. And then Best Picture, like we said, Ordinary People wins, no kidding. Coal Miner's Daughter, Elephant Man, Raging Bull, and Tess are the other nominees.
It was just OP all the way. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I've always loved this film. Like I don't remember the first time I watched it, but I've definitely seen it more than Raging Bull.
That's funny. I'm definitely not, obviously, because I just saw it for the first time. But I would say, like, having seen it, I still think Raging Bull is a better movie, but I have no problem with Ordinary People having won Best Picture over Raging Bull. I don't think Raging Bull is the type of movie that would ever win Best Picture. And, like, even in a different year, I don't think it would have won. Like I said, I would make a case for Scorsese to win for Best Director, but otherwise, I don't think it's a total fraud that Ordinary People won at all. I think it's like a very strong win, and it's actually like a really great movie.
It's a great movie. This is like another, or I guess Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan is like this. It's just like they're 2 great movies, and like the more auteur driven one, like the bigger spectacle, loses, or like the one that people think or want. I don't even think, like, I think Ordinary People, like people back then thought it was going to win because it was just winning stuff, but just like the people now, like the film that people now want to win, it lost. So it just develops this narrative that they were robbed, and they picked the Academy picked a shitty film to win. And obviously the Shakespeare in Love win is a lot more loaded with Harvey Weinstein, but I love that movie too. Like and Saving Private Ryan is my favorite movie, but I don't have a problem with Shakespeare in Love winning because I love that movie too. I've watched that more recently than Saving Private Ryan.
We talked about that when we did that Oscars. Shakespeare in Love is a fantastic movie. It's just
and I also have no problem with Gwyneth Paltrow's win. Like I think there's just a lot of like external elements that I think cloud people's judgment of this, and then yeah, like as time goes on, it develops this like lore that is like these movies lost to inferior movies, and obviously it's fine to have your favorite and your preference and to not like either movie that's up against each other, but I think, you know, it like try to find like the value in like what they chose. And I mean, not to say like they haven't made awful choices before, but I don't think either Ordinary People and Shakespeare in Love are bad movies.
No, Ordinary People is a great movie, just like fully great, and it deserved to win.
Yeah, and I also love like how economical it is. Like I think it's just it's so simple, and I think that's kind of what bumps people too. Like I think people think like like bigger and flashier spectacles need to win, and I think we have a lot of that later on this decade, like we were saying. But I think people think like when it's like a simple movie, like there's not enough effort in it. I think they want to see effort or something.
Yeah. Well, it's also like I think effort and like this like film like I'm guilty of this, obviously. It's the same Raging Bull for years was robbed. But like the film bro mentality that these like Saving Private Ryan is the same thing, right? Like it's like, oh, there's gotta be more. It's like the more masculine idea of a movie, right? Or whatever you want to call it, versus like Ordinary People, which is obviously not as flashy, like we were saying, in terms of like the filmmaking or anything. It's just
Yeah.
like a good story, well told.
Yeah,
Which
and I think there's a lot of Ordinary People fans too. They're not as vocal as I think obviously it's a lot easier to be mad about something that lost than to just like keep talking about something that won, right?
yeah,
So
I guess I mean the other thing is like we were saying, like I don't think like Scorsese is still the biggest director right, of like
mhm.
in terms of film Twitter. It's like you cannot get even maybe bigger than Spielberg for a lot of people at this point, even at the box office. Like
Yeah, and like Spielberg is a lot more commercial.
and so like Redford is not that on that level, obviously, and I was like Scorsese is still like out there getting talked about, getting these Oscar nominations, so people are going to always value his stuff over other people's stuff, whether that's right or wrong.
Yeah. Um, I also think there's just, with Ordinary People, there's more of like an emotional component too. And I don't know if it's the same as with the characters in Raging Bull.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you're really being asked to spend like 2 hours as just a total asshole. And like
yeah,
Ordinary People,
it's
you're
like I think
getting
you
it.
can recognize like their great performances, right? But like I think like Ordinary People is also more relatable because I think this like hopefully, like no one has to go through, losing a child, but like it's happened to people, right? And like or like various forms of grief too.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more relatable, I think.
I can't believe I made it to that PTA thing before, and I'm like Raging Bull staring me in the face when that's also Boogie Nights. I was like, wow. So next time, if anybody talks to PTA, ask him what he was doing 1980 because he must have just been sitting in
He
movie
was just
theaters,
watching
fucking
all these
taking notes.
movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's 3 movies in the
Watching
same
the
year.
Oscars.
That's
So
3 movies in the same year. He's actively referenced in other movies. Like, how is that? I'm sure we could find other ones too. He really loved the 1980. Damn.
I mean,
Uh,
he was 10 at that, so it's like,
that's
come
pretty
on.
good. That makes sense, honestly.
So
For the other, so we saying these were the 5 nominees. Uh, so the other 5 for Best Picture, Joyce. This is what I came up with.
not man.
Stuntman because of Richard Rush and Peter O'Toole. Fame because I think they really liked it. Melvin and Howard, 2 Oscar wins, including a screenplay win. And then I filled out the last 2 spots with The Great Santini and Empire Strikes Back, which won an honorary Oscar for special effects, basically.
Uh yeah, I wrote down Empire Strikes Back too. I don't know. I feel like it's easy to say now or like if it happened now, like it would get in, but back then like the reception wasn't as high, Obviously the Star Wars got in 77. So, but I think like maybe just like the bigness of it could have gotten
Mm-hmm.
in. So, I don't think they would have gotten, but I also wrote down Private Benjamin at 9 to 5.
I had Private Benjamin and 9 to 5 on my second like ranking, and then also The Shining, which would never get in, obviously. But
No,
uh
but
yeah, Fame, I feel like they were really into.
yeah, so I won the music categories, and then when they won song, Dolly Parton blocked them from going to the stage, which was great.
Uh Fun the music category like we could do so screenplay we mentioned there briefly but just we don't have to go Melvin and Bo Goldman went for Melvin and Howard then for original screenplay the other nominees were Brubaker Fame Mon Onakil de Merakik and Private Benjamin would have been nice to get Nancy Myers an Oscar there maybe but what are you gonna do
Yeah. And Raging Bull, no screenplay nomination. So
Correct. And then Ordinary People wins adapted screenplay. Not surprised. Breaker Morant, A Coal Miner's Daughter, Elephant Man, and The Stuntman again showing up here.
Yeah. Would you have nominated Raging Bull for adapted?
I mean,
Like,
maybe.
I don't think it's like a huge, like, I'm not mad about the snub. It's kind
No.
of like Flower Moon.
Yeah, I mean, Raging Bull is like much better than Flower Moon. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's like an egregious snub.
Yeah.
Let me think what on the music. So we said like Fame wins song, 9 to 5, classic song. On the Road Again, truly a classic song. Out Here on My Own, another classic song, also from Fame, and People Alone from The Competition. Wins song. Score went to Fame over Empire Strikes Back, which is fun. John Williams still getting nominations.
Still, like right now, not back then. So.
I know, still getting now. The other stuff I wrote down, 2 other quotes I had from the show. Let me see which category this was. Hang on, I gotta look at the Oscars. For documentary short and documentary feature, it was Richard Chamberlain and Leslie Ann Down did the presentation, and it was The Showgirl and The Shogun, Joyce.
Leslie Ann Down. Richard Chamberlain, star of the 1980 version of Shogun. So
he was our Cosmo Jarvis.
He was our Cosmo, our Anjin.
He was our Anjin. I gotta say, people love Richard Chamberlain. My mother was like the biggest Richard Chamberlain fan from this and the Thornbirds.
Of course, the Thornbirds.
And then in that intro, after they do that, Leslie Ann Down says, "Richard, will you explain to us what a documentary is?" And he does.
There's a lot of explaining in some of the presentations. When Steve Martin was explaining cinematography to Blake Tanner.
That one was cute. That was an interesting one because like we said, this is very not compared to like what the modern Oscars are, like, which I think we would say probably got ushered in with Billy in the 90s, right? Like that kind of like what we expect the modern Oscars to be, with like a big monologue and like hack presenter banter and all this stuff that we're used to. This did not have a lot of that. It was very much like very focused, like I said, like two people at a podium talking. But the Steve Martin bit with Blake Tanner actually felt the like, oh, like this is what it will become. You know what I mean? Like I was really the only one that had that kind of like energy. Certainly helps that Steve Martin
because it was a joke,
right?
Too. And also that category. So Tess won. So this kind of sad, this category. So at 2 cinematographers test, because Jeffrey Unsworth, he died during production.
Yes.
So then Ghislaine Cloquet finished the film. So remember, this show was in March 1981, and then Ghislaine died November 2nd, 1981. So very sad.
Yeah, his daughter, I think they did accepted.
So then what else?
The other one I wrote down.
Speaking of presenting, like Peter O'Toole's presentation with Sissy Spacek. Great.
Peter O'Toole was great. It was like, man, another guy probably should have won an Oscar.
He has a quote in Inside Oscar too, but when talking about his nomination, he's like, or like if he was gonna get nominated, he's like, I've lost 5 times, so like, why not? Like get another one. So we'll see. And
not to double back, the other thing I wrote down in terms of like, oh, this is like another reference to or modern comp to modern was Mary Steenburgen winning and saying, I'm going to have to figure out something new to dream about, which felt like an Anne Hathaway line if I've ever heard one. I really wish she has gotten a subsequent nomination. Actually, no one in this category, supporting actress, has been nominated again. No. So I love Mary Steenburgen. So Eileen Brennan for Clue would have been nice, Joyce.
I love Clue.
We'll talk about that when we get to 1985. Anything else here before we wrap up our first of our many Oscars playbacks in the 1980s? I don't know. The last thing I wrote down here was director hair, which we already talked about. So, but the Henry Fonda. Glad you mentioned that. So Rob Redford comes out to give Henry Fonda an honorary Oscar, and this is a great way to end it because we'll talk about this a lot in our next episode when he actually wins a competitive Oscar. Henry Fonda never winning a competitive Oscar until the following year. And sadly, which we'll talk about, he was not able to attend that Oscar. So this is like the last time he's able to do it. And not to step on stuff we'll say next week, but man, I was very pleasantly surprised by On Golden Pond, which I rewatched or watched for the first time also recently because I'd never seen that. And man, that was great. And it had Robert Redford, just great presentation, and Henry Fonda getting a nice ovation. I thought that's like a really nice moment. And who knew that he would be able to win competitively, a year later?
Well, so in the video on YouTube, they obviously don't include the montage that was shown at the ceremony, but in Inside Oscar, they said they included in the montage weren't just like his old films, but they also had like a sneak peek basically of On Golden Pond. So yeah, he came out. He had a cane. Again, also still great hair, white hair, but great. Very nice speech. Pretty short and succinct. And yeah, he would win the following year. Couldn't be there, and then he would die that August.
Yeah, very soon after. I think 5 months later, like you said. And then just in terms of presenters, Sally Field and Dustin Hoffman did the actor and actress, like no kidding. And then Lillian Gish did Best Picture.
Yeah. The huge ovation for her.
It was cool watching this because now it's like, oh, like we do this now, right? With like we're gonna bring out the old timers, like Al Pacino, obviously. My eyes see Oppenheimer, right? But I'm like,
did not say that.
In 1981, it's Lillian Gish and fucking George Cukor. George Cukor
and King Vidor for director. So.
For doing Best Director. I was like, oh my God, this is wild. Sometimes it's wild. Do you ever think this? Sometimes it's wild to think that these people who made these great, like the people from the 40s are obviously still alive in like 70s and 80s, but it's just you don't actually equate them to that time period. So when you see them up there, I was just like, oh my God, like that's so wild that George Cukor is up there like, presenting an Oscar.
For me, it's more like when I watch these old clips, like I'm just like, oh, I'm like this person's age now, and like it's like because like when you grow up with people who've always been older than you just always think like they're older, and then when you get to their age and it's like, oh my God, we're the same age now. It's like this person, so it's like, yeah. And then obviously, yeah, we're gonna it's interesting because I don't even know if we have like that kind of reverence for like the older generation of stars, like we like here like with like Lillian Gish, and like Peter Ustinov, right, coming out to hit the screenplay categories. Like I think because like media is so fractured now, like I feel like if someone of like, I don't even know who would be the equivalent of Lillian Gish now, but if someone came out like that now, I feel like it would not, it maybe in the room it would be the same ovation, but like publicly I feel like it'll be like, who's that?
Well, I think the other problem is I think the people who it could be don't go away. You know what I mean? Like Lillian Gish is 88 years old here, right? So like probably the first time, and because of like just in general, like that's not like people are not always seeing Lillian Gish. With Pacino, I mean, he's only 83. That's a lot different, and age is different nowadays, right? Certainly, like people are living longer and all these different things. But I'm like, Al Pacino's never not like, when do you not see Al Pacino? Like it's like he's around all the time. I feel like it's not like it's not a surprise. We don't have people like if they brought out Harrison Ford, right? Or like these people are still active in our lives.
Yeah, you need people to go away and then like not be online either. Whether like by their own accord or just like as a target of like, like paparazzi or something, and tabloids and or just like online chatter. It's like because back then, we weren't connected. So it's like you could miss and forget about people for a longer period of time.
Right. George Cukor was 82, I think, when they did the Oscars. I'm like, Francis Ford Coppola's got an Oscar movie maybe this year.
And he's just like all over Instagram.
Like he's got an Instagram account, right? I follow Francis Ford Coppola on my phone. I'm like,
yeah,
I see him all the time.
I see, like I open Instagram and he's like another post from Francis here.
It's like nobody goes away ever. It would honestly, the comp would be like Gene, if they actually got Gene Hackman would be like
Hammond, I hope in that best.
You know what I mean? Like that would be he's like, but he is literally like the list of people who are
because he's actually retired and gone away.
Right, he has gone away. Like Clint Eastwood is making a movie this year. You know what I mean? Like Paul Schrader is still making a movie, right? Like, yeah, Gene would be like, it would be like if they got Gene Hackman to do Best Picture, I guess maybe that would be like he's the one guy who's gone away. Robert Duvall, I guess too,
and
right?
now he's just being stalked in his retirement. Yeah. We're doing laundry.
Yeah, Robert Duvall too would be a good one maybe to bring out now.
I mean, he was nominated, The Judge less than a decade ago.
Here comes The Judge. Remember the judge?
Of course,
Remember Jeremy Strong in the judge, Joyce? That one's
Obviously.
he's gotta hope people buried that one under the museum, right, or something to get that.
He's talked at length about that performance in The Judge.
Holy cow! All right. Well, we'll be back next week with the 1982 Oscars, Joyce.
With
immortal,
the oldest set of winners ever,
and
or acting winners.
The immortal Chariots of Fire is the Best Picture winner.
Over Reds.
Over Reds. And a
But,
director.
I love the Olympics.
The director split here. Yeah, this is definitely this is an AARP Oscars if I've ever seen one. So I'll talk to you then, Joyce. Bye.